on Tuesday when we talked about love. You know how I love to confuse people, right? I like to talk about things and go around and inside and out of them. And I recognize that a lot of the chats have that pattern where we talk about things and then we turn around and we take a detour almost. And it all connects together in the end. But there's a spiraling in and out of the subject and bringing different nuances and different ideas to it, different thoughts and feelings about it. And I thought, do we really want to confuse people? And my guide said, but everybody's confused already. And I thought, yes, but this is where we come to be spiritual, to learn, to exchange ideas. Why are we confusing people further? And he said, we're not confusing people. But every time we talk about something in this way or that way, you must remember you have a network of people, all of whom are thinking about the same thing in different ways. So some of the time you are acknowledging their thoughts or their ideas on a subject, and some of the times you're introducing new ones. But when you put all of those notions and ideas into the pot, then it seems confusing. Pretty much like mass consciousness does. Because the mass consciousness is in fact that pot where everything gets thrown in and everybody has a choice, a free will choice, and sometimes an energetic resonance with a particular idea, with a particular notion. And that awakens something inside of them, and the rest of it can be forgotten. So when you listen to the chats again and you hear something more distinctly than other things, then you might think, oh, didn't hear that then, but that makes sense for me now, or that's something I can work with. So last week when we were talking, for example, as we were talking, everything came back to, it doesn't matter what pace you go at, so long as it's forward. It doesn't matter what pace you go at, so long as it's your pathway, not somebody else's, right? So that the speed of things doesn't matter. Similarly, when we talked about forgiveness being a cornerstone of different things, we also make it clear that if you don't want to forgive, that's a choice. There's all of these ideas and notions that come together to give us a holistic view of something and then leave us open to making our own choices, because we are not in the habit of prescribing things, of saying this is how you must be and that is what you should do. If anything, the spiritual pathway is about getting rid of the must-dos and should-dos and shouldn't-dos and all of those unspoken rules that sit inside of us and determine us. And then on Tuesday we talked about love, and I thought, oh dear God, here is a topic designed to confuse everybody. And so I asked Shahina, and I even asked the group, did we manage to confuse you? Because already everybody is confused about love. What love is supposed to be, what it isn't, what it is, and the idea that everything within the limited human framework can in fact exist, not harmoniously, but simultaneously, is something we need to grasp as human beings. That we can be angry and loving simultaneously, that we can be resentful and kind simultaneously, that we can be happy for somebody and envious simultaneously, that the light and the shadow lives simultaneously. So when we talked about focus last week, it was about where do you choose to focus yourself? What do you choose to resonate with? In this entire spectrum that is available, where is your intention taking you? And because this is the year of living intentionally, we must acknowledge the spectrum. We must acknowledge the two sides or the three sides or the four sides of something that's happening simultaneously. We have grown accustomed to this or that thinking, to going into extremes about things, and to even creating our identities in that tunnel way of living and doing. So one of my clients today, I talked about how we get too busy with our work. And it's like, well, if I don't go to work and if I don't earn that money, then I won't have the lifestyle. Right? We all agree. If you don't go to work and you don't earn the money, you won't have the lifestyle. So I say, okay. So now you have the lifestyle. Are you enjoying the lifestyle? No, I'm too busy. So I think, okay. We can all glaringly see the imbalance, right? But everybody is afraid to bring balance to it. Because out there, in the real world, that I do not seem to live in for some reason, or everybody thinks I don't live in it, there is this thing called competition. If you ease up and you create balance so that you can do your work and enjoy your lifestyle, the competition will take over and you won't have work anymore, and then you won't earn enough to maintain your lifestyle. That's the thinking. That's the fear, right? Now tell me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm seeing it with human beings everywhere, that we must work this hard. And the Dalai Lama talks about this all the time, how we have this crazy life in which we are dedicated to working so hard in order to earn money that in the end doesn't give us good health, doesn't ensure that we are enjoying our quality of life, doesn't bring us joy. There's an emptiness at the end of it because we are over-identifying with a competitive, ego-based value system. And while it sounds so out there, we don't stop to see, what is it doing inside of me? So I used to have a friend who worked just to go on holidays. He would work intensely for 3 months and take 6 months to travel, to holiday, you know? And most people were so astonished and horrified by this almost nonchalant attitude to whether or not I have work, whether or not I am employed. And he always had great pleasure in the fact that he worked for himself, that he vacationed more than he worked, and that it was okay to run out of money, and when you run out of money, go do some work in order to earn enough to have the next holiday. And I always used to say to him, this is a crazy system. This is a crazy system. You know? Why don't you create your life so that you are permanently on holiday, and whatever work you are doing, it's part and parcel of the holiday. Why do there need to be those extremes of intense work here, where I must earn and earn and earn and earn, and then 6 months holiday, relaxing, spending all of that money, knowing that at the end of it, there must be another intense 3 months of earning money? And he said, I'm like that. When I work, I work. When I party, I party. I can't seem to do the two simultaneously. I cannot find a happy balance between the two. And if we look at our lives, we will see where we are not finding a happy balance for ourselves, where there is this imbalance that says, in terms of priorities, whenever I have to make a choice, what are my priorities? What informs that choice? And immediately you will see the imbalance. So just sit quietly for yourselves. If I say, we're all going to visit Shahina for Mahashivaratri, what is the first thought that comes to mind?
Can we go in terms of work?
Yeah. Work schedules. Work schedules come first. And with that work schedule, immediately there is a litany. It is a nervous condition now, where a button gets pressed here and a whole range of electrical impulses go out in order to talk to your obligations and your responsibilities and all of those things that must actually keep you in a specific space for as long as necessary. Yeah? So parents have this fight all the time. They have to go to work, leave their kids with caregivers, creches, schools. And there is always a concern at the back of their minds about whether their children are doing well. Single mothers will talk about how they feel so guilty that they're not with their kids enough, but they're too busy. They work too hard. And all of that is to give their children a better life. And you say, but your children will have a better life if you get some balance, if they spend more time with you. And they don't believe that, because their children have got to have a better life on the physical plane in competition with everything else. And a consumer society has taught us to compete even within ourselves. We compete with who we were. We compete with what we're not. We compete with other people outside of ourselves. We want things to be just so, done in that particular way. It must match the pictures of what everybody else has posted on Facebook or elsewhere. I mean, we've taken to comparing people to each other. I was watching the video of Justin Trudeau, who's always going to be handsomer than almost any leader on the planet, right? He's also a whole lot younger than most of the statesmen. He speaks French. Of course he's going to sound charming. But I was watching this video and there he was next to Trump. And by comparison, Trump looked really awful, I have to tell you. And everybody was making the comparisons. And the competition between countries about whose president and prime minister looked better and spoke better. And I was people. This is not going to do you any good whatsoever. It's not going to make your country better. It's not shifting your consciousness. But it is an automatic, habitual, conditioned reaction to living on the physical plane. So this finding the balance is actually the finding the balance between surviving and living. Which one are you doing more of? Surviving or living? We have talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how you start with the base chakra, and the base of that triangle speaks to survival. We've done a releasing the base chakra attachments meditation, and we're working our way up this triangle so we can get to self-actualization and transcend the triangle completely. Break down the barriers that hold that triangle together and the levels that are categorized between each one. But even then, regardless of how high we go up on this particular triangle, you challenge anything at the top of the triangle and everybody races back to survival, right? I am constantly getting told, don't expect a hungry man to have faith. Who can focus on God or be meditative when their stomachs are growling? And then I am constantly saying, but I am not even hungry when I am in my zone. Which is when I get out of my zone and I identify with the physical plane survival mechanism of my physical body, that I am starving. Then I am starving. Until that moment, I don't even remember that I need to feed my body because I am so nourished in other ways. So the body itself has a mechanism to bring us into survival mode. That reptilian brain is designed to keep you in survival mode. But you have to decide what survival is for you. Because survival is not a bigger bank balance. Survival is not more designer clothes. That's not survival. Survival is not competition with everybody else. Survival is the understanding that you have what you need now, this moment, in order to be present with yourself. So animals live survival mode. I have never seen any animal require a refrigerator. Not in the wild, not in their domestic circumstances. No animal has required a refrigerator to hoard a kill in order to say, well, you know, tomorrow I won't have to dash out and kill something. I've hoarded it for later. And just in case all of the buck leave town in the meantime, let me get this. Or if another pride of lions comes into this particular space, let me hoard my kill. That reptilian brain that works for survival uses all of its senses and extrasensory perceptual tools, which is why we know animals think faster, feel more, hear more clearly, see more clearly. They're using all of their extrasensory perceptual tools with their sensory perceptual tools for survival. And in doing so, they are living that moment fully, answering the needs as they arise fully, without having to hoard for the what ifs and the maybes and the possibilities. So are you all still just surviving? And if you are not surviving, then is what you are doing actually living? If you are too busy to live, too busy. Now, I have nagged about people being too busy to meditate. But are you too busy to love? Too busy to notice the changes in the people in your life? Too busy to pay attention when somebody is talking to you so that you can hear what they are saying and feel what they're saying? Too busy in your head to get available, accessible to yourself and others? And the minute a new suggestion, a possibility, an opportunity arises, are you already too busy to open up the pathway? Are all of the opportunities sliding by because in terms of the survival mechanism, you are too busy and too in competition, and the opportunity itself does not look like it has any physical, plain, material value to it? And what we know for certain is that as we grow older and get better at being ourselves, and usually the two do seem to coincide, because experience is its own teacher, and we start to let those things go, we start to let those survival things go, we can have more fun, we can be more relaxed about life, we can take things in our stride better. Because inside of ourselves, all of those experiences bring a new sense of assurance, reassurance that you are not just surviving, and that when a survival issue comes up, you will manage it better. You will take it in your stride. You will cope. You won't just survive it, you will live through it. And this, I have to say, is a wonderful thing about experiencing life and growing older. But in the midst of that, we have to actually eradicate some of the fears that keep us in survival mode. The fear of money. This goes with poverty consciousness. The fear of other people's opinions. Another level of poverty consciousness. The fear of not winning, of not being good enough in that competitive game. The fear of never proving oneself to others. Now, these are all wonderful things to have when you're 10 years old and 15 years old, and you are living all of the angst of a teenager. It goes with that particular rhythm and heightened hormones and a general craziness of discovering one's identity. But by age 30, by age 29, when identity and the karmic effect of that has come into play in our rhythms and cycles of growth, we have to start shifting. We have to start transforming. It's grow up time. By age 33, we should no longer be in survival mode. By age 33, the essence of self has become clearer, and in our becoming something, in our internal development, this self-assuredness begins to settle inside of us as a spinal strength, as the strength of your energetic spine and your physical spine saying, I can manage this, I can do this, I can be this. That kind of assurance. When we don't have that, then we wind up in pain. Because it is actual betrayal of one's capacity to live fully, to cling to the reptilian brain survival mechanism of immature souls, as opposed to old, high vibrational souls who know better, who were even born better already. And when it comes to survival, we know that survival of the fittest is the rule of the animal kingdom and the reptilian brain. And we know automatically that there is a physical strength required for that. This does not apply on the spiritual plane. On the spiritual plane, there is an emotional, mental, and what I like to think of as spiritual strength, actually, that comes to bear, that becomes your accomplished being, your assured beingness, your peace of mind beingness. That is the abundance of self that you take through all lifetimes. So the strong brute strength, physical strength of the physical plane dies with your physical body. And it becomes immaterial to have that kind of physical brute strength if you are a wishy-washy Charlie Brown inside. If you don't have the strength of your own convictions, the strength of your own passions, the strength of your own truth that lives inside of you and vibrates out with the physical strength. If you don't have that, then it's very easy to just be a bully, which we are all perfectly capable of being in this network, thank God. But over and above that, the survival mechanism keeps us afraid of others. Firstly, it creates others. That's what the survival mechanism does. It separates us. It creates others over there, distinct from me. And that is what creates that selfishness. There is an element of selfishness in survival itself that must be present as part of our experiencing on the physical plane, as a limitation of the human brain for us to evolve out of and become love, become compassionate, become grace. We have to have that. We have to outgrow it in order to be the more, to reach the spiritual strength of things and balance them into each other. So then when we're racing up and down Maslow's triangle and his hierarchy of needs, it's because we are conscious, we are awake. Then we can slide down to survival and manage it and rise up from there back into the heart center of compassion and kindness. Then we own the triangle as opposed to the events of the triangle owning us. Which leads us directly into the real spiritual strength, which is detachment. So after the events of the past month or so, and me discovering that my feelings are open to being hurt, and it was a bit of a discovery, you know. I had to learn that my feelings can be hurt despite the fact that I am living a fairly well-practiced detachment. So I got a rude wake-up call to the understanding that detachment, firstly, does not separate you from anything. It immerses you in everything. Detachment does not put a shield or armor around you that you become invulnerable to the vagaries of human interaction. Human interaction is always, without a doubt, going to hold its element of piss you off, drive you crazy, stab a knife in your back if it can get away with it element. That is the nature of humanity with its reptilian survival brain. That's it. We can look at it, we can say, oh yeah, okay, whatever, thank you. But detachment is not going to put an armor or a big brick wall between you and that. What detachment does is that it gives you the strength, it even gives you the patience, it gives you the sense of humor, it gives you the ability to manage it better. So where before you would have felt a knife in your back, now it will feel like somebody has poked you with a pin. The intensity of human plane limited behavior patterns lessens, becomes muted because you are in fact detached from the dramas of it, the taking it personally of it, the making it yours, absorbing it and living it thoroughly inside of you, and then realizing it's actually not about you. So detachment places a boundary between you and others that does in fact keep you safer than you might otherwise have been. But it does not protect you from all of the possibilities of being wounded on the human plane, just as it does not protect you from love itself. So detachment is about feeling everything more, being everything more, and being able to manage everything more. Which is marvelous actually, if you think about it. Because it keeps you living, constantly living. Instead of sliding down into survival mechanism mode, where there are requirements and necessities, and then we have to strive to get those so-called requirements and necessities. That's what survival is about. Even the identity that sits there in the base chakra becomes a necessity. We want that identity so that other people in the world can identify us and say, that was me, that was me. I can take the credit for it, or I can be seen and acknowledged. These are all survival mode mechanisms on the physical plane, emotional plane, and mental plane. Spirit itself has no need to survive. It is eternal, infinite. Why would it need to survive? As energy, it has no survival mechanism. So one of my clients phoned the other day to say, her father is dying. And I said, please tell him I wish him well with that. I wish him well in his dying. And she thought I was being offensive. Oh, how can you say that? And I thought, how can I not say that? How can I not wish you well in your dying when this is a necessary experience? It is the opposite spectrum of surviving the physical plane. If we didn't have death, would you work so hard at surviving? If you were born knowing you were going to live here forever, would you work at surviving? Really? No. Moreover, would you even be born if you knew you were going to be here forever? Hell no. So death is a necessary part of this experience. It is necessary for us to have limitations and boundaries on the human experience, on the human doingness of things, so that we can outgrow them, and in death leave most of those limitations behind. And everybody should be wished a good death, that they should do it well. It's not like we're not going to do it again and again and again, right? Like most things. But if we do it well this time, maybe we'll do it even better next time. Because everybody wants to experience their own death too, and do it better every time. They want to experience different types of death even, because there are so many ways of taking this trip. The mind boggles at the variety that's available in the modern world. I mean, you could get yourself shot into space in a capsule and have it explode in space and go home that way these days. You know? Such adventurous ways of dying. Nobody has to be locked up in a hut by themselves in the dark to die anymore. We can do it gloriously, we can do it with company, we can do it with an audience. But the minute there is any inkling of dying, nobody stops and says, oh, this is my ticket out of here, best I cherish it, I don't want to lose this ticket. Let me not hand this ticket into somebody else's keeping. Let me keep it. What happens? We go directly all the way back down to base chakra into survival. I have got to survive my dying. Suddenly, I want to live more. And of course, we get so busy surviving, dying again, that most of the people who are fighting death are not living at all. They're just marking more time on the calendar and taking a longer time about it. Now, I don't mean to sound like I'm not compassionate about the experience of dying. I am, because dying is a very difficult thing for most people. But in our consciousness, this survival mechanism sets us against ourselves. It takes what is natural and true of our beingness, and even the very necessary spiritual boundaries of our existence, and puts us into conflict with them. It puts us into a lack of acceptance. Detachment takes us into a space of acceptance. We all know that we are going to die. We should all wish to die well. And because you want to die well, you should live well in advance of your dying. That is the only cure for death. To live as well as possible, so that when you actually get to that experience of dying, you will do that well. You will not then scramble for survival because you haven't lived yet. And then, of course, in all of this drama about surviving and living, which is underlined or emphasized by the understanding that we are dying, it defines it. It makes it real for us. There is the knowledge that everybody else in our lives are either surviving, living, or dying too. When you're merely surviving, you're still busy dying. When you're living fully, you're still busy dying. Either way, you're busy dying. Either way, you are not going to cheat death. And death is not something that we need to cheat. It's not something we need to survive. It's not something we need to outgrow and outdo or compete with in some way. But surviving and living come with a completely different quality of life, a completely different sense of oneself, a completely different state of mind and attitude. Surviving doesn't necessarily hold all of those peace of mind qualities that the spiritual pathway offers, and especially not detachment. Surviving requires an alertness that leaves us unable to rest, unable to relax, unable to be so fully present with something that you are immersed in it fully. The spiritual pathway and learning detachment gives us that. Living intentionally sets us on that pathway and gives us that. And part of that particular game between surviving and living, there is an assurance in it. There is an assurance in it that every breath you are given is given gladly, unconditionally. So you can choose, am I surviving or living? And where in that spectrum am I at this stage of my life? There is the element of being loved and having belonging, which elevates us from survival. And then we use the fact that we belong, that we are part of things, as an excuse to go right back to surviving. So now we must start to restructure the thinking around it, restructure the consciousness around, am I living or surviving? Surviving is very much a left brain, logical, technical way of viewing life. Surviving will take you into future thinking and keep you stuck in the past, because everything that has happened before must inform how you manage, react to, deal with, cope with, survive this moment here and now. And in fact, you will never be completely in this moment here and now for as long as you are in survival mode. Survival will take you into the future in order to plan for it, and if you can, control it from here. In fact, survival will keep you in a defense mechanism, control mechanism way of dealing with the world, and still you will die anyway. You will not survive. All this hard work at surviving, and you will not survive. All of the hard working at living, and you will live. And in the living, you will acquire that quality of life. All of those things that give you the assuredness, all of those things that give you the peace of mind, and tell you that not only have you transcended the limitations of the physical plane itself, but that you have transcended the inherent limitations of the human mind. And that is what this work is about. That's what the intention of living intentionally is. That is the intention of detachment, to transcend the very limitations that exist in our consciousness and make us less every day, every moment, in every possible way. And I know this to be true, because when I talked about love on Tuesday, it was such a big thing for me to say to people, love isn't. It is only potential. The minute we start talking about love and grasping it in our logical brain and bringing it onto the human plane and making it about this and attaching it to that and rationalizing and working with it and doing it, we have taken it out of the realms of spirit and made it less. And I was explaining to Shahina, the human brain has created God in such a small way, and then we have taken love, which, whether or not it exists in the universe, we just call that energy, love. We have taken that and made it small too. And in our competition with each other, in our competition with the mind-bogglingness of the universe itself, we are seeking to survive. We are seeking to live. We are seeking to own things that we know nothing about. And if God is love and love is God, we do not have ownership of any of that. We can only experience it moment by moment and harness the potential of it within ourselves to say, okay, I hold this potential of love within me. So when I meet with something that requires it, that embraces it, I can give it fully. And that's hard for most human beings, because we live in attachment. Survival is attachment. We live in that attachment. And we want everything about us to be defined in that attachment. That's part of that ego box we've been talking about. But God and love and faith and grace, those things are intangible. It isn't. It isn't ours. It isn't ours to own. It isn't ours to define. It isn't ours to make small and make understandable to the human brain. It is ours to live, to experience, even to become, with the full understanding that we are only becoming a facet or aspect of it, never the wholeness of it. And yet, and here's the conundrum for me, that although we are only experiencing and becoming an aspect of it, a particle of it, it brings us wholeness. We can never experience the fullness and the wholeness of it as it is potential in the universe and isn't tangible on this physical plane. And yet it brings wholeness. It brings fullness of being. It brings this expansion of yourself into everything. And the thing that makes that possible is detachment. So now when I hurt fully. You poke me with a pin, it pierces deep, I feel it completely, and then the pin disappears. I don't know where it goes, and I don't know who takes it out. It disappears. Whatever wound there was heals almost instantaneously, and I am returned to my state of balance. I put my feet in the water at Ngome together with Pandora, and Pandora lay down and she was rubbing her belly in it, and I noticed that the spots on her belly have eased up already. But I put my feet, and my feet were burning for the first moment or so, despite the fact that the water was freezing cold. And I could feel all of this old energy just coming out of me. My feet are always sore. I stand on them too much. I put the world on my shoulders and I wear them down. And they're always sore. And I thought, oh, this is so wonderful. And I came home, and for 2 days afterwards, there's this energy flaring off my ankles. And you know, one of my favorite songs is Take the Shackles Off My Feet So I Can Dance. And it feels, this energy that's flaring off me, feels as if something is removing shackles. And I thought, how wonderful. Detachment removes these shackles that we don't even know are there. All of these unknown ties and entanglements, shackles that bind us to things that are not even conscious in our consciousness. But just practicing this sets you free. It liberates you. It moves you automatically out of survival and into living. And once you're living, you can go anywhere. everywhere. And who doesn't want to go everywhere? Now, I'm always preaching that people should have due consideration. Due consideration for the people they live with. Due consideration for their responsibilities. But responsibility is not a burden. Responsibility is the ability to respond to something. And we take on our responsibilities because we love. Because we love. So today, and I am delighted that Carol has not come to meditation. Today, Carol and Sharisa picked up their baby girl. And this is the only baby. And I've seen lots of babies. Gorgeous, 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 melt my heart babies. But this is the only one who has ever made my heart explode with love. I mean, I could feel myself vibrating with it. An instantaneous, no conscious thought love. And immediately with that came a responsibility. Not a burden, but the ability to respond to that love is a responsibility. So I assigned myself Granny. I made myself adopted Granny. Because that love that lives inside of me needs a space of expression. It wants to be told. It wants to be felt. It wants to be heard, embraced, and lived. And the only way for me to do that is to have a relationship with that being. So we have a new Granny's girl. And this is love. This is the potential of it that lives inside of all of us. And it takes a level of detachment to make it about the love. To not make it about the object or the person or about self. It takes a level of detachment to just feel it and flow with it and live the love itself. And let the love create the relationship as opposed to determining it and defining it and demanding of it. Human nature is such, on the limited plane, that it makes us selfish. We go back to our limitations all the time. Living intentionally and practicing detachment, coming into balance between the extremes of self, being able to experience the spectrum. I mean, these things, these games that we have to play here in our bodies are all part of a consciousness contract that we have with everything else. So we must play the game well. We must play the game with integrity. We must play the game with the willingness to allow the next level and the next level and next level of self, so that nothing is lost, ever. So that nothing is wasted within ourselves. It takes intention. It takes detachment. It takes the practice of things to do that. The universe has no magic wands in it. It has only the alchemy, the magic of this potential, this creative essence, this intelligence. And that's what love is, actually. That's what our creativity is. That intelligence that sits there as potential available to everybody. It has that. And staying on course, just staying on course, gives you access to that in ways that even I could not have imagined possible. So I look at the people in my life as they are changing. I mean, I'm watching Pandora blossom into a whole new being. And you know, if we were upgrading God dogs, that's it. I mean, she was far better behaved than Paddy would ever have been at Ngome. Paddy was a bit of a brat, you know. And I'm so okay with saying that and Paddy having a big giggle about it. You know, the Duchess of Kildare. There is a humility in Pandora that Paddy had no notion about. So she was a Shiva girl and she lived that. And I see how the different stages of my own spiritual development have brought me different companions, different accompaniments in my growth. And Shirdi Baba is always saying, the energy that you are becoming, the energy that you are becoming will put you in a space that is already that. The energy you are becoming will make sure you are embraced by that resonance already. So if we are becoming something, the universe will give you a sacred space that holds that which you are becoming well in advance. Your becoming in that sacred space is assured. It is given in advance, like everything else. But here we're talking energetically, we're talking the resonance of you. Anything that you are intending for your own spiritual development, all of that is given to you. It will come to your zeal chakra, it will come to your third eye, it will come to your heart center. Always the upper chakras, because it's not about human survival and therefore the human chakras. It will be given to you so that you can live it. So that your becoming is supported and is already. So everything you are becoming, you are already. And of course they will provide companionship, experience, understanding, so that your becoming is informed, that the database of your body shifts and changes accordingly. We come back, bring it full circle. So, have I confused you all yet? Damn! So just to bring it all together into one space, balance in the spectrum between survival and living. Nobody in this group is living on either end of the spectrum. We are all running up and down. But you have to check by default, is your default stance survival? If it is, please go back to the very beginning of this entire set of meditations for how many years? 5 years? And start again. It is a spiritual journey worth noting and brings you into a space of automatically living intentionally. If you want to know what the 5 years of meditating have done in terms of the journey itself, then I would be a good example of that. If only because I have channeled it and not listened to it again. I have lived the meditations. So I am a good example of what that spiritual journey of 5 years of meditation can produce.